Well, I can take my phone and I can look up a crazy history and just an insane amount of history about the United States. Its founding, let's say that. But how can I apply that to today and make a difference? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dive into that for a second. Mm-hmm. All right. So in the founding of America, you had, I saw this the other day knowing that I was going to be on the podcast, and I actually looked this up. I saved this to my phone so I could read this. This is insane. These are the ages of the founding fathers in 1776, okay? James Monroe was 18. I saw your eyebrows go up.
Hold on.
How old was Aaron Burr?
Hold on.
In 1776, how old was Aaron Burr?
Well, I mean, I have no idea.
He was 20. John Marshall, 20. Alexander Hamilton, 21. James Madison, 25. Benjamin Rush, 30. John Jay, 30. Thomas Jefferson was old. He was 33 when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Paine was 39. These guys, and the comment the person put here, this is great. He said, never lose sight of the fact that these wise men were just young men fighting tyranny. They weren't trying to be lifelong politicians. Oh. They were kids fighting for freedom. They literally were fighting for their life. When they signed that document, they realized it was their death warrant. If we lost that war, they were dead. And we get to look back on history knowing how it came out. The internment camps of the 1940s were in World War II. That is an explosive subject right now. I can't believe, but I do want to point out, by the way, it was done under a Democrat president, FDR. I want to point that out. Okay?
Wait, the internment camps of?
Japanese Americans were literally put in internment camps during World War II. They were American citizens of Japanese ancestry, and they were locked up.
In America?
Yes, sir.
So in World War II, we're in this war. So Japan's on the wrong side at this point.
That's right.
Or at least the different side than us.
Right.
And we took Japanese Americans
Yes.
who were not spying for Japan.
No, they were regular American citizens.
And we had them in internment camps?
You're darn right.
Why have I never heard of this?
I don't know. Why have you
How
never
many?
heard of that? Thousands. Thousands and thousands.
Like a prison? Like we put them in prison?
Well, it depends on your perspective if it was a prison or not. But, I mean, when you're held against your will, one could say that's a prison.
Yeah. Like what were the facilities like? Or was it?
They had, like bungalows and those type of things. But yeah. And they were fed and taken well care of and all that stuff. They weren't like, in Auschwitz or something like that.
Were they trying to mitigate against these people coordinating amongst themselves, rising up from within?
That they were trying to mitigate that. They also didn't know where their loyalties lie.
Sure.
Now, you talk about controversial. Mm-hmm. Well, it's real easy to criticize that, knowing we won the war. Mm-hmm. Right? That's a tough decision to make. Mm-hmm. One that is very conveniently left out of FDR's his repertoire. When people talk about it, right? So so what happens is we got several things going. We got all this information, a flood of information that's just it's everywhere, with fewer and fewer people knowing how to apply the information. Okay. Then you got people who refuse to have common sense. And I do think it's a refusal. They just refuse to. You have the Ketanji Brown lady that just got put on the Supreme Court. This is a woman who sat in her hearing and refused to say what the definition of a woman was. She refused. She knows. She knows. I know she knows. She knows that I know she knows. Mm-hmm. She knows what a woman is. But she refused to say that definition. And so when you look at that, you say, well, that's insanity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're not even talking about the whole trans debate and all that. Let's don't even talk. We don't even have to get into that. Mm-hmm. We know what a woman is. You know what a woman is. Go ahead and say it. It's okay. You can say it. We know you know. Mm-hmm. And she refused. Mm-hmm. And she's sitting on the highest court in the land. Mm-hmm. That's where we've gone with things. So that's an example of just regular common sense. I don't care what side of the aisle, quote unquote, you fall on. That's just common sense.
So when someone would you not look at that and look at that as a byproduct of the attack on freedom of speech? Because she knows, and I agree with your assessment that she knows.
Of course she does.
She's not saying it, though, for certain reasons.
That's right.
Probably no one held a gun to her head and said that you cannot answer or complete the sentence on what is the definition of a woman. Probably no one did that. but because of the systems and the habitual repercussions on certain things for saying certain things, and it's just like it's like unspoken. It's like an unspoken rule that you can't talk about this.
That's right.
And that's ultimately just an attack, systemic attack on the freedom of speech. Is that what you would chalk that up as?
Sure. Part of it, yeah. And part of it, she's playing to a base of constituents that, she wants to satiate.
Sure. Yes.
But yeah.
Yep.
And so that's an example. And America is uniquely free in its speech. At least it was for many, many years. The change in America is not what shocks me. It's the rapidity. It's the speed at which we're seeing some of these things change so quickly. The idea of there's always been socialist or communist in America. And since its founding, since before its founding, there were people that leaned a certain way or other, even if they didn't use those titles, communism or socialism, but the concept or the idea. But the steam with which some of those things have gained in the last few years, it's just shocking.
Yeah. It's
just utterly surprising. And these are people who, when was the last major world war? Well, that's 80 years ago. So most of the people who were in the war are dead. Mm-hmm. So there are very few people alive who actually remember anything about World War II. Mm-hmm. So relatively speaking, Americans have encountered 80 years. I know we had Vietnam. I know we had Korea. I'm not trying to slight those things and enduring freedom and all that. I'm not trying to slight those. But a major world war that genuinely affected your day-to-day life. The average American was not affected by Vietnam on a daily basis. He went into the factory, he made the plant, he made tires for a living, and he went home and he played ball with his kid. But that wasn't necessarily the case in World War II. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've had 80 years of peace, relative peace, and relative economic, not just stability, but economic excess. Mm-hmm. A very successful economic. There's been ups and downs, but for 80 years. And so what happens during those 80 years is you get detached from that. So those names I just read off of the founding fathers that were young, these guys were fighting a king who simply refused to acknowledge that America was going to be its own country. Well, you want the freedom? Well, you can come and get it. Mm-hmm. Well, they knew they were going to lose their fortunes, and they did, and they knew that they were going to lose their lives, and many of them did. They knew it was at stake, but they believed in what they believed in so much that they were worth losing this. They were willing to lose those things and fight for them. So the thing that I look at in America today is I go, well, what are people willing to fight for? What are they willing to die for? What are they willing to say, this is my line in the sand and I will not go past this?
Well, some people are willing to die for the sake of the vaccine. And I don't mean you took the vaccine and then you died. I don't mean that at all. I mean, some people are so woke that they have said on Twitter or wherever that they would rather take the vaccine and die from the vaccine, excuse me, than because at least then they feel like they're on the right side of history, than not have taken, excuse me, than not have taken the vaccine and they feel like that would be, in other words, they feel like it was more important, even if the vaccine killed them, to take it.
Wow.
So to answer your question, what are people willing to die for? Well, some people are willing to die for a what would you call that? A signaling? What's the political term? Like a
virtue signaling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people are willing to die for virtue signaling.
Yeah. And some
but
people
aside
also,
from that, to answer your question, what are people willing to die for? Well, not the same things that we used to be willing to die for.
Right.
And just not much in general. I mean, do you think that, because I would be in one of those at 38, I don't remember World War II. And so most people now have grown up, myself included, with not having faced directly sort of a life or death situation in terms of our country battling some others. And do you think that sort of breeds almost a false sense of security?
I think it not only breeds a false sense of security, I think it breeds weak people. I mean, if you're always comfortable, if you're always fed, if you're always air conditioned, and listen, I obviously love food. You can tell. I obviously love air conditioning, and I love heat. I love knowing that when it gets cold, I go push a button on my wall, and boom, 30 minutes later, my house is nice. I love that. I like refrigeration. I'm not saying that we need to do without those things, but I am saying that when all you do is live in comfort and you're never uncomfortable, and that includes in your speech, in what you have to hear, and what you have to endure from others.
Yeah. That's a big point.
When it includes that, then it's like, well, okay. So the old saying, and we've heard it a million times. This is not new. I didn't create it, but good times breed weak men. Weak men breed bad times. Bad times breed strong men. And I may be butchering that a little bit, but that's the well, we're in the part where we've had good times, and so it breeds weak men. Well, why? And that's men and women, of course. But but why does it breed? Well, because you've never had to battle. There's I was in Italy a few years ago, and I think I may have mentioned this on the last podcast. We were there. We were wandering around wild boars. I was talking to the guy that in Tuscany. I know that sounds so pretentious. It does. Anybody that knows me, like I grew up, anyway, it just sounds like I need to hold my pinky out.
I like it.
But he was telling me that wild boars, there's 400,000 in the Tuscan region, and they are a German subspecies, and they came over to Italy, and they came over to that portion of Italy, and they have no predators. So they are prolific reproducers, because nothing is killing them other than hunters. There's no wild animals that will take them out and control that population. So, well, how are you comparing that to people that are comfortable? Well, they've been able to proliferate because of that. Well, the ideals that people have are the same as those boars. I'm never going to have anybody push back on those ideas if we're all comfortable and happy. We think we know it all and we've got it all, because look at us. We're a picture of success, right? I got a roof over my house. I got food in my belly. Goodness gracious, I got this thing down. Well, you've never been through a worldwide economic depression like we had in the 30s. People don't understand how bad it was. I mean, it was unbelievable. We have 50% unemployment. Let that wash over you for a minute. We lose our minds when we get to 6 or 7%. It was 50. Half the people in this country couldn't find work. It wasn't that they weren't willing. They couldn't find it. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that is unbelievable. It's hard to imagine how we would make it through something like that.
That's exactly right. And so that generation who's all dying off now, when you grew up in that stuff, it's hard to find somebody alive who actually lived through the Depression, which essentially, it effectively ended during World War II. By that time, the economic machine was cranking so hard that if you needed, and unemployment went down to like 1%. I mean, you could find a job if you could physically stand or you had a job making something for the war effort. So World War II essentially ended the Depression. But so now you got to have people who were born in the 20s to remember the 30s. And those people are now 100 years old or close to it.
Yep.
And so that's the last generation that really remembers, I would say, widespread struggle.
Yeah.
Rick, are you wishing a widespread struggle on us? No, I would much rather go learn the lessons without having to go through the pain.